canvas. And you want to make sure you're blending all of your colors together. There's no defined line of these colors being separated. They all sort of blend together. When you're blending in your paints, if you feel like it's not blending in, it's a little bit dry by now, just make sure you add a little bit of water into your paint. This makes it make it easier to blend. When you're blending in these colors, if you feel like it's still a little bit too light for you, you can always go over your orange with pure magenta and make it even darker. So I'm adding in a little bit more magenta into mine to darken up the bottom of my canvas. As you're painting in your background, something that's kind of neat about these canvases is they are gallery wrapped. So if you're planning on hanging up your canvas, you can just take these, sort of paint the edges and the tops of your canvas to give it more of a finished look. And you can use any color, it doesn't have to be the same one you're using for your background. Some people like to paint it in with black. But that's all we're going to be doing for our background for now. So I'm going to give you guys a few more minutes to keep working on blending in all of these colors together. Again, just as a reminder, we mix white, then yellow, then magenta and yellow to make it a bit darker on the bottom. Again, you want to make sure you go in between all of these colors. Make sure there's no defined line of these colors separating each other. So we're going to give you guys a few more minutes to keep working on your background. And during this time, for you guys that are finished with your background, just make sure that you put your brush back into your little water jar so it doesn't dry out on you. Just make it easier to sort of keep your brushes organized and keeps them from drying up on you.
So let's take some time and let those paintings dry. That background, we want that to be completely dry before we get to these next details. Oh, as Emily's painting also dries and she takes a little break, I wanted to come in here and say a quick hello. I think Emily might be one of our instructors who is the most like Bob Ross. That was the most relaxing, escaping time I've had in a long time. That she just has a soothing voice. I didn't want to interrupt. I thought I'd jump in there and chit chat with her, and she's probably blushing right now. But I'm I'm in a different room, but I can hear her laughing. So let's take some time to let those paintings dry. I know it's a small class today, but let's all check in here on the chat. We love to say hello, maybe where you're from, where you're painting from, and we want to try to make this as engaging as possible. Even though we're a small group, this afternoon. What's also kind of fun is we're sharing right now live on our Facebook feed just a small sampling of this experience so that others can kind of have a peek behind the veil and see what we painters, you painters, we painters are all doing here on an afternoon. Maybe we'll stroke some envy and like, oh man, I want to make a painting because we're still, even though it's virtual, we're making it easy. So for those of you out there in Facebook land hearing us live, we do have curbside touch-free pickup now of our materials with very limited windows to come by the studio to pick it up here in Ontario. And we're doing what we do, making paintings, going step by step, making gorgeous art, no experience required. What's fun is when you're at home, you can paint in your PJs. You can paint however you want to paint. You can paint wherever you want to paint, except in groups right now. That's too bad. But we're making the most of it. And we like to have a drink with our painting and just make a relaxed afternoon of it. So let's take a few more minutes and let those paintings dry, and then we'll check back in with Emily and move forward with the next details. So don't be too detailed. Let your painting dry. We have painters all the time. Just continue to tinker and tinker and tinker, but then that background just doesn't get dry. So call it done when you're done, and give it a few minutes. You can maybe give it a little fan, blow some air on it, let that dry, and we'll get on to the details momentarily. Emily, I'm going to jump in here for a second. A moment ago, I'm still learning so much. I had the mute button pressed. So you were a silent painter. I'm so sorry. Since we've been the learning curve, all this technology. So if you could kind of rewind, you're obviously in a little white paint just to kind of remember about your son there. That'd be fantastic. Thanks, Emily.
Alrighty, so for our sun, I'm actually going to make an enlarged version so you guys can really tell what I'm working on. So I'm going to use my red tip brush just to show you a quick little sample of how we're going to be painting in our sun. So we're going to be using pure whites for our sun. I'm going to use my red tip brush just as a sample for now. So we're going to start off with a small little circle, kind of like so, very loose. Doesn't have to be filled in completely. It's a very loose circle. And all around our little circle, we're going to add little tiny clouds. So we're just going to loosely sketch them in. You can use your brush kind of like a pencil and hold it very loosely. Just going to sketch in these loose clouds. There's not too many of them. Kind of like so. Except on our canvas, we're going to do it much smaller. So you want to use any small brush, in this case, my yellow tip brush. And again, we're going to be using pure white. And your little sun is going to be positioned somewhere in the center, a little bit lower than the center towards the right of your canvas. You're just going to paint in the small little circle and the little clouds, sort of very sketchy clouds. And again, if you are confused in any of these steps or want me to repeat any of my steps, make sure you leave those in the comments, any questions you might have. So it is a really small shape. We're going to be going over this with our pink clouds eventually. So if it's not a perfect circle, that's completely fine. Alrighty, so that's about it for our sun. So we're going to let our sun dry for a little bit, and we're going to switch off to working on our pink clouds. So for our clouds, you're more than welcome to switch off between either your red tip brush or your black tip brush. I'm going to be using my red tip brush for my clouds. So it is the second biggest brush. It has red on the bottom. And you want to have your mixing board handy since we are going to be mixing this very light pink color. So with your red tip brush, you want to grab a tiny scoop of whites. I'm just grabbing a tiny amount of whites, putting that on my mixing board. Then I'm going to grab a scoop of magenta, that on my mixing board as well. So you got a little scoop of whites and a scoop of magenta. And then you're going to dip into a small amount of yellow and mix these three colors together. So you want to grab magenta, white, and yellow. And we'll get this really light pink color, like mine up here. Again, it's very light pink. It's magenta, yellow, and white. And as I did with my sun, I'm going to show you another little sample before we get started. So there's several different ways of painting in your clouds. So the way I'm going to be showing you is one of the easiest ways I find, and it's just making little circles to paint in your clouds. So when circles, just draw one little circle, and then you make a bunch of all these tiny little circles on the side, and then stretch it out. And all you're doing is small circles. And that's pretty easy. The ones on the original, they're very loose. They're sort of like wiggly lines. The original artist sort of just stamped paint and stretched it out. So there's these really big blobs, and they get really thin on the edges. Kind of like so. I'm going to do it on my canvas now. And you want to have that light pink color. And you don't want to have too much of that light pink color on your brush. You want to have a small amount of that color. And then you can start placing these clouds wherever you want. There's no specific number of clouds, so sort of you can be free with these clouds, sort of shape them into whatever shape you might want to shape them into. And I'm just going to stamp in my clouds loosely. So there's one. And then for these very loose, sort of linear ones, it's going to be very loose with your brush. They're all horizontal. So again, you can either stamp them in or make small little circles. In the meantime, as we're painting in our little clouds, I do have a few questions for you guys. So what are your guys' plans for Easter? Since we can't have really big groups, what are you guys planning on doing for Easter? One thing I do want to mention is the clouds get a little bit thicker as you get towards the bottom of your canvas. So you can grab a little bit more paint now, make them a little bit more thicker. When you're getting close to your sun, feel free to go over your sun. The clouds are mainly at the bottom of the sun. You're just sort of stamping these in very loosely.
And Emily, I'm going to chime in here for a second. A question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What encouragement would you have to our painters when it comes to being detail oriented and maybe slightly perfectionist when it comes to clouds?
Actually, I used to be a really big perfectionist. When I first started working here, I had a really big issue trying to get my paintings trying to be exactly like the original. If something were off, I sort of got like kind of moody. It wasn't really completely original. But at the end of the day, this is your artwork. It's all going to look different. Mine is going to look different from the original. That's what makes this unique. Um, it is your painting, so feel free to sort of play around with it. It does take a lot of practice, though, if you want to have really identical paintings to the original. So you'd have to practice every day the exact same painting if you wanted to get an identical painting to the original one. But my advice is just to sort of be free. Don't get stuck on the details.
So, do you feel like you are now a little less, you're more forgiving of yourself and a little more free when it comes to recreating these paintings?
Yes, definitely. I'm more forgiving of myself now, especially seeing all of these other artists. I'm more like comfortable in my own like little skin. I can paint whatever I want now. It doesn't have to be identical because again, we're all different human beings.
I do find it very encouraging when our instructors teach these paintings and how they are very different sometimes from the original. And what we mean is that it's not absolutely identical. And I think that speaks a lot to us as humans because no two humans are the same, right? So no two paintings should ever be the same. Even when the original artist teaches their painting and they recreate it, it's still going to be a little different because um, it might have been several months since they had made the original, and now they're a different person several months later, and it's going to get reflected on the canvas.
When you're painting in your clouds, if you're noticing they're not showing up too much when you get towards the bottom of your canvas, Might be because they're blending into the orange a bit too much. So just make sure you add in a little bit more magenta into your mixture. So now they get a little bit darker as you move towards the bottom of your canvas. So you're going to keep on working with that same brush, except you're going to add more magenta into your little mixture. That way your clouds get darker and a little bit more noticeable. Alrighty, so I'm just going to give you guys a few more minutes to keep working on your clouds. There's a few clouds on the top of your sky, but when you get towards the bottom, they are sort of accumulated on the bottom, so get a little bit thicker. But once you are finished, again, you want to leave your brush in your water jar so it doesn't dry out on you. I'm going to give them the clouds a little bit of time to dry.